There comes a moment not loud, not dramatic, where something inside you snaps, not with rage, but with clarity. You realize no one is coming to fix it. No apology will ever rewrite the past. No perfect day will arrive to start fresh. The door has been locked from the inside this whole time, and it was always you holding the key. You look at your life, and it doesn't lie. It reflects every decision you delayed, every dream you postponed for the sake of someday. That day, it's not on the calendar. It's waiting on you. There's a battlefield between the life you have and the life you crave, and you won't cross it by waiting. So stay with me until the last word, because if you walk away now, you'll walk away from the moment that could have changed everything. The stillness that seduces. There's a silence that doesn't feel like peace. It feels like pause, heavy, lingering, like the breath before a confession you never make. You tell yourself you're getting ready, that the delay is discipline, that you're being responsible. But deep down, under the layers of logic and excuses, you know the truth. You're hiding. You are endlessly sharpening your sword, but you've never once stepped onto the battlefield. You keep rearranging the plan, refining the vision, waiting for the right words, the right timing, the right version of yourself. But there's no ceremony coming to anoint you, no divine signal that says, now you're finally worthy. That moment, it's a myth. The cost of waiting. What no one tells you is that preparation has a dark side. It can start as wisdom and rot into avoidance. It wears the disguise of patience, but it's fear in formal clothes. And fear, when dressed as discipline, becomes the most dangerous lie. You convince yourself you're just one more book away, one more morning routine away, one more upgrade, one more affirmation, one more clean page in the journal. But your soul isn't starving for more prep. It's starving for risk. You don't lack strategy. You lack motion. And every day you delay, the cost grows quieter, but deeper. Your confidence doesn't just fade, it decays. Slowly, quietly, until the gap between who you are and who you could be becomes unbearable to live with. When perfection becomes a prison, you were not born to rehearse life. But that's what this trap does. It convinces you to rehearse your power without ever stepping into it. You imagine the speech, but never speak. You dream, but never build it. You study the path, but never walk. And one day, without realizing, preparation becomes your prison. Because here's the truth. Perfectionism is rarely about high standards. It's about protection. You're not afraid of failing. You're afraid of being seen while failing. You want the power without the exposure, the victory without the vulnerability. But there's no armor that can shield you from the necessity of beginning. The fire metaphor, you can read 1,000 books on fire, but you'll never feel its heat until you reach your hand toward the flame. And yes, it might burn. It might not go how you planned. But even pain has a lesson. Even failure moves you forward. Do you know what never moves? The one who waits for certainty. Certainty doesn't exist at the beginning. It is earned through motion, through missteps, through the sacred, brutal clarity that only action can reveal. The quiet truth. The world doesn't need your readiness. It needs your rawness. It doesn't need your perfect timing. It needs your honest trying. You think courage is loud, but most of the time, it's a whisper. Go now. Go scared. Go anyway. No one will come to hand you permission. No moment will ever feel perfect. And still, you must move. Because the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to believe in the part of you that was meant to begin. And that part, that silent, stubborn fire in your chest, it's not asking for guarantees. It's asking for you. Not later. Not better. Now, the quiet war within, sometimes you can feel it before you can explain it. That strange heaviness, like something inside you wants to move, but can't. You wake with an ache, not in your body, but in your spirit. You know what you should do. You know where the next step is, but you stall, you drift, you delay, and then you hate yourself for it. But this isn't laziness. It's something deeper. This is self-protection, not self-sabotage. And if you don't understand the difference, you'll spend your life punishing yourself for a wound you've never dared to name. The invisible wounds. You see, delay is rarely about time. It's about belief. And most people are not procrastinating on tasks. They're procrastinating on the emotional weight of who they believe they're not. You put off applying because you already think you'll be rejected. You stall the business idea because deep down you believe someone smarter has already done it. You don't start the healing work, not because it's too hard, but because some part of you whispers that maybe you don't deserve to be whole. This isn't about effort. It's about identity. Delay is often a defense mechanism for the soul, a way of keeping you from facing the pain of not feeling enough. When delay becomes a shield, stalling isn't just a habit, it's a shield. You delay because movement means exposure. Action means truth. And truth, real, raw truth, threatens to dismantle the fragile identity you've spent years building around survival. So you protect the false image instead. You keep your potential wrapped in shadows. Because if you never fully show up, then at least when you fail, it won't feel personal. But that's the price. If you never fully show up, you'll never fully live. The hunger you can't unfeel. What's dangerous is that delay doesn't kill you quickly. It starves you slowly. You become used to the ache, used to the yearning. You normalize it until hunger becomes your default state, and you mistake starvation for discipline. But that hunger, it's not going away. That thing inside you that keeps calling, keeps bothering you, keeps haunting the edges of your quiet moments. It's not noise. It's not weakness. It's your truth. And it will keep knocking until you either answer or numb yourself enough to forget it ever mattered. The turning point, so what now? You stop waiting to feel worthy of the dream. You stop stalling until it feels easier, or clearer, or more guaranteed. You stop running the same loops of avoidance. And you confront what's actually stopping you, the belief that your wounds disqualify you. But what if the opposite is true? What if your wounds prove you're ready? Not polished, not perfect, but deeply human. And that is what the world actually responds to. Not performance, not perfection, just presence. The shift that changes everything. The question isn't, why do I delay? The real question is, what am I protecting myself from? Because once you answer that, you start seeing delay for what it truly is, not failure, but fear. And fear, once named, loses its power. You don't need more motivation. You need more honesty. The kind that cracks your voice when you speak it. The kind that stings before it sets you free. That is how the delay ends. Not with a plan, with a reckoning, the waiting room of life. There's a kind of waiting that doesn't feel like patience. It feels like purgatory. You sit in silence, convincing yourself you're being faithful, that you're trusting the timing, letting things unfold, surrendering to the process. But underneath that calm exterior, you're not peaceful, you're paralyzed. You've turned faith into a hiding place. You're not waiting on a sign. You're hoping for permission. The dangerous stillness, we're taught to look for confirmation. When it's right, you'll know. When the universe is ready, it will show you. And so you wait. You delay. You hope. But hope without action is spiritual sedation. It comforts you just enough to do nothing while convincing yourself you're doing everything. Faith is not fragile. It does not require you to sit still. Real faith has motion. Real faith says, move, even if your hands are shaking. But passive faith, that's different. That's the kind that asks for signs because it's afraid of responsibility. It wants a divine green light before taking the first step. But here's the truth you already feel in your bones. Most signs come after you start walking. The false comfort of signs, you tell yourself, if it's meant to be, the path will open. But sometimes the path doesn't open. You build it with scraped knees, sleepless nights, and a faith that isn't waiting to be validated but proven in the fire of experience. Waiting on a sign can become an addiction to comfort. You hope for clarity so you can avoid discomfort. But if clarity was a prerequisite for greatness, no soul would ever rise. You're not stuck because the path isn't clear. You're stuck because you want certainty more than you want freedom. When faith loses its edge, true faith is not passive. It's confrontational. It dares you to move before the storm passes. It challenges you to create without guarantees, to speak without applause, to rise without rescue. The kind of faith that transforms lives is rarely soft. It's gritty, messy, uncomfortable. It doesn't ask for comfort. It demands conviction. But the version of faith you've been sold, the one that says wait until it feels right, wait until it all makes sense, that's not spiritual. That's fear dressed in Scripture. The truth you've been dodging, the truth is, you already know what needs to be done. You're not confused. You're afraid. You're not unsure. You're unwilling to walk unknown without a guarantee. And that's okay. Fear is allowed to come with you, but it's not allowed to drive. You keep asking for a sign. Deep down, you already got one. You're uncomfortable. You're restless. You're haunted by the life you haven't touched yet. That's not just emotion. That's divine direction. And it won't go away until you respond. The invitation. Stop waiting for a sign. Start becoming one. Be the evidence that someone can move before they're ready. Be the proof that faith doesn't have to look polished to be powerful. Be the sign someone else has been begging for by doing the thing you keep postponing. Because the cost of passive faith isn't just delay, it's decay. And the longer you wait, the quieter your calling becomes. Don't let it go silent. The lie of the perfect start. You've been taught to wait until things are beautiful before you begin. To launch only when the lighting is right. The voice is clear. The plan is polished. The path is visible. But life doesn't give you clean beginning. It hands you a shovel and says, dig in the dark. And you, like so many, hesitate, hoping your first step will feel smooth, noble, cinematic. But real transformation doesn't start like a sunrise. It starts like a breakdown. Messy, awkward, humbling, and absolutely necessary. The fear of being seen raw. You're not afraid to begin. You're afraid to be seen beginning. You fear the blank stares, the silence after you speak, the eyes that might watch you fumble. So you hide behind preparation, polish, and procrastination, not because you don't care, but because you care too much. But listen carefully. You cannot become powerful in private and expect to impact the world in public. You have to be seen in your becoming. There is no shortcut around that humility. Why ugly starts are the most honest. Every polished master you admire once looked ridiculous. Every best-selling author had a first draft that made them cringe. Every speaker who commands the room once stumbled over their own breath in silence. The difference isn't talent. It's tolerance for embarrassment, imperfection, awkwardness. The willingness to start ugly is not just brave, it's sacred, because it means you've chosen honesty over illusion, truth over performance. The disguise of perfectionism pretends to be ambition. It says, I just want to do it right. But in truth, it's fear wearing pride like armor. Because if you never start, you never have to confront the truth of where you really are. You get to imagine your greatness instead of earning it. But imagination without action is spiritual rot. You either begin messy, flawed, and human, or you die with your potential still intact, never broken, never tested, never real. The first steps always feel wrong. No one tells you this. The beginning never feels like the beginning. It feels off, weak, embarrassing. You question everything. You stumble more than you stand. But that's how it's supposed to feel. Starting is not proof of readiness. It's proof of hunger. You don't start because you're confident. You start because not starting has become too painful to live with. The power of presence over polish. What moves people isn't your perfection, it's your presence. It's the rawness in your voice when you say, this might fail, but I'm doing it anyway. It's the trembling in your hands when you speak the truth. Unpolished, unsure, but real. There is a quiet, electric power in choosing to be seen before you feel worthy. Because in that moment, you teach the world what courage actually looks like. The unspoken contract. Here's the contract. You must be willing to look foolish before you look formidable. You must let go of how you wish it would look and make peace with how it must look. And that version, it's clumsy, it's raw, it's human, but it's real. And real is what reaches people. Real is what grows. Real is where you begin again as someone who's finally done waiting for the perfect day. You want to rise? Start ugly. That's how the real ones are born. The lure of the aha moment. You keep waiting for it, that moment. The breakthrough, the flash, the knowing. You imagine it like lightning, slicing through the fog, finally making everything clear. And until it comes, you wait, you plan, you second guess. Because somewhere deep inside, you've been taught that clarity is a prerequisite for movement. That insight comes first, and action comes second. But that's a lie, a soft, seductive lie that keeps too many lives on pause. The reality of how clarity works. Clarity isn't something you wait for. It's something you earn. It doesn't arrive in a dream. It shows up in the dirt, in the doing. Insight is the reward of movement, not the condition for it. But you want guarantees. You want to know before you go. You want the plan to feel perfect before you commit your hands to it. And in that hesitation, you lose momentum. You lose months. Sometimes you lose years. The paralysis of the thinking mind. There is a type of thinking that feels like progress. But it's a trap. It keeps you analyzing, optimizing, over-preparing. You circle your vision like a hawk, studying it from every angle but never landing. And soon, the mind becomes a prison. Because thought without action is just fear dressed as intelligence. And overthinking is just avoidance with a better vocabulary. The only way to know is to go, you want clarity? Start moving. Because progress sharpens perception. The path doesn't light up until your feet begin to hit the ground. You don't find your rhythm before the first step. You find it in the stumble, the sweat, the awkward dance of becoming. Nobody figures it all out at the beginning. They just move forward humbly, blindly, honestly, until the fog lifts. And that moment you've been waiting for, that clarity, it only arrives once you've shown it you're serious. The courage to walk into uncertainty, you have to stop waiting for the perfect angle before you swing. You have to let go of the fantasy that you'll just know when it's time. Because most of the time, you won't know. And that's where courage lives in motion without full understanding. You don't need to see the whole staircase. You just need to trust the strength in your next step, even if your voice shakes, even if your hands are unsure, even if you don't know if it will work. Action creates alignment. Every time you move, even imperfectly, you get feedback, not just from the world, from yourself. You learn what lights you up, what drains you, what feels like truth. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, you begin to align, not because you waited for the answer, but because you became the kind of person who could handle the answer. That's what action does. It grows your capacity to receive clarity, not all at once, but layer by honest layer. The invitation to begin without the blueprint. This is your permission to stop waiting for the map. The map is built as you walk, not by experts, not by perfectionists, but by the brave, the flawed, the faithful. So no, you don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to begin broken, blind, and burning with the question, what will I learn if I dare to move? Because here's the truth. The mind wants clarity before it moves. But the soul only finds clarity through movement. The clock, you can't rewind. You carry it like a bruise under the skin, quiet, but always there. The hours, the years, the chances you let pass, the days you didn't speak, the work you avoided, the dreams you buried under comfort and fear. You remember them, even if no one else does. And sometimes that memory burns sharper than the pain of anything you're facing now. Because wasted time isn't just about lost opportunity, it's about the version of you that never got to live, the shame that follows you. People rarely talk about the grief that comes from what they didn't do, not the mistakes they made, but the actions they never took. And that grief lingers. It sneaks into quiet moments. It whispers when you lie awake. You could have been further. You should have done more. It's too late now. And if you're not careful, that voice becomes your compass, guiding you by guilt instead of growth. Why the past feels heavier than the future. You replay your choices over and over, not because you're learning, but because you're punishing yourself, as if reviewing your failure enough times will somehow pay off the debt of lost years. But regret is not currency. You don't owe your past. You only owe your present the full weight of your attention. Because here's the hard truth. You can't rewrite those chapters, but you can decide what kind of story they lead into. The dangerous illusion of too late. You think the window has closed, that the dream expired with the missed opportunity. But that belief is a lie dressed in logic. Because there's still breath in your lungs, still fire in your belly, still time on your clock. The world doesn't need a perfect timeline. It needs you fully alive, fully surrendered, and finally here. You are not late. You are just done waiting. The courage to face yourself without judgment. Forgiveness doesn't begin when someone else says, it's okay. It begins when you stop treating your past like a crime scene. When you stop dissecting every misstep and finally admit, I did the best I knew how to do, with what I had and who I was. That's not an excuse. It's a reckoning, a truth that sets the ground for growth. Because until you forgive yourself, you will sabotage everything good that tries to grow in you. Redeeming the time, not recovering it. You can't get those years back, but you can make them matter. You can take everything you lost, everything you missed, and let it shape the fire you carry forward. You can turn delay into depth, hesitation into hunger, and regret into a resolve that no one can question. That's how you redeem time, not by pretending it didn't happen, but by proving that you still do. The quiet turning point. This is where it changes, not with noise, not with fireworks, but with a decision so silent only your soul can hear it. I will not punish myself anymore. I will move forward, scarred, wiser, awake. You don't erase the past. You integrate it. You carry it differently now, not as weight, but as witness to what you lost and to what you're still capable of building. The lie they sold you. They told you discipline was a talent, that it was something you either had or didn't like, musical ability or athletic grace. That some people were just wired that way, and maybe you believed them. Maybe you looked at your own inconsistency, your scattered efforts, your unfinished plans, and thought, I guess I'm not built for this. But discipline has nothing to do with personality. It's not a gift. It's a war you choose to fight every single day against the parts of you that want to stay safe, small, and asleep. The inner battle most people never name. This isn't about routines. It's waking up early or having a checklist. This is about something deeper. The sacred tension between who you used to be and who you're trying to become. Every time you choose discipline, you are choosing to betray the part of you that wants to stay broken. You are choosing to interrupt the cycle, to step out of emotional habit and into conscious, painful action. And that choice, that moment of inner friction, is where everything changes. Why discipline feels like suffering. Let's not romanticize it. Discipline often hurts, not because the task is hard, but because it demands something you're not used to giving. Your full self, your full attention, your full accountability. It's not that the work is always grueling. It's that it strips you of your excuses. It forces you to sit with your patterns, your impulses, your shadows, and still choose forward. That kind of clarity is terrifying, and most people run from it. They'd rather stay busy than become honest. The spiritual nature of self-mastery. At its core, discipline is not about productivity. It's about reverence. It's how you show the world and yourself that your life matters. When you say no to comfort, yes to struggle, and maybe later to every quick fix, you are declaring that your future is worth something. You are treating your time like it's sacred, your energy like it's currency, and your body, your mind, your soul like instruments that require care, not chaos. That's not self-help. That's self-respect. The cost of living undirected. What happens when you don't choose discipline? Nothing dramatic, nothing explosive. You don't crash. You fade, slowly, quietly, tragically. The days blur. The goals dissolve. The sharpness of who you could have been dulls into the background noise of maybe next time, until eventually you forget that you ever had an edge. You forget that you were once willing to bleed for something greater. That is the price of undisciplined living. Not chaos, but mediocrity. Your discipline defines your identity. You are not what you feel. You are not what you think. You are what you do. Discipline turns your intentions into reality. It makes your values visible. It takes your someday and moves it into the present, whether your mood agrees with it or not. And the more you act from that place of integrity, the more you believe in yourself. Not in theory, not in concept, but in practice, in proof. The final choice you make daily, you won't always feel inspired. You won't always feel aligned. But that's not the point. You don't show up because it's easy. You show up because it's yours. And every time you honor your discipline, even when it's inconvenient, even when no one is watching, you remind yourself who you are. And more importantly, who you're becoming. When failure feels like finality, there's a point where failure stops feeling like an event and starts to feel like your identity. You don't just say, I failed. You begin to say, I am a failure. That shift happens quietly, not with one moment, but with a slow erosion of belief, each missed step, each broken promise to yourself, each unfinished beginning. And eventually, you don't just doubt the dream, you doubt whether you were ever worthy of chasing it. The invisible weight of quitting on yourself. What haunts you isn't the fall, it's the memory of all the times you could have stood back up, but didn't. And now, the idea of trying again doesn't feel noble. It feels humiliating. Because trying again means admitting you weren't as strong as you thought. It means confronting the fact that your effort last time wasn't enough. And that stings. So you hesitate. You convince yourself that staying down is safer than failing again. Because silence doesn't judge. But it also doesn't heal. The truth failure was trying to teach you, what if failure wasn't meant to define you, but to refine you? What if all it ever wanted was your attention? Not your shame, not your identity, just your growth. Because failure doesn't lie. It tells you exactly where the gap is between who you are and who you want to become. It shows you what wasn't ready, what wasn't real. It breaks the illusion. And that's not cruelty, that's clarity. You weren't broken by failure. You were just being reintroduced to the truth. The rebuilding doesn't need an audience. The decision to try again doesn't need to be loud. You don't need to make announcements or prove anything to the world. Because the most powerful decisions are the ones no one sees. The ones made in silence, in solitude, in sacred rebellion against the part of you that wants to disappear. Trying again isn't about proving you've changed. It's about becoming someone who no longer hides. Why most people stay stuck. It's not because they're lazy. It's because they confuse relapsing with being unworthy. They fall once, and instead of recalibrating, they internalize it. They make a home out of disappointment, and they stop trusting their own hands to rebuild anything worth keeping. But you're not most people, and you don't need perfect confidence to start. You just need the courage to interrupt your own surrender. The spirituality of starting over, to choose again after heartbreak, after humiliation, after defeat, is not weakness. It's spiritual warfare, because you are standing in defiance of the lie that your past controls your future. You are looking at your scarred reflection and saying, I still believe there is something worth building with these hands. That's sacred. That's holy. That's yours. The quiet invitation, you don't need more time. You don't need more evidence. You need permission, and only you can give it. You can choose again, not because you've forgotten the pain, but because you've remembered who you were before you gave up. And maybe that's the beginning, not of a comeback, but of a return to the fire, to the truth, to the part of you that never stopped hoping, even when everything else did. The lie that sounds like progress. I'm working on it. 3 words that feel responsible, respectable, even brave. But sometimes those words are just polished versions of, I'm not doing anything real, but I don't want to feel guilty about it. You whisper them to yourself like a lullaby. To stay safe, to stay unbothered, to avoid the discomfort of actually stepping into the arena. And the tragedy is, it works. For a while, you keep the illusion. You sound like you're moving when deep down, you know you're circling the same starting line. The mask of perpetual preparation. There's a kind of paralysis that doesn't look like fear, it looks like planning. You tell yourself you're reading more, studying more, waiting for the right time. But that mask of preparation is a brilliant disguise for inaction. You're not sharpening the sword anymore. You're hiding behind it. And if you're honest, you know it. Because every day you say, I'm working on it, but don't act on it. You train your nervous system to tolerate regret. You get used to watching potential rot behind the glass of good intentions. The cost of carrying unlived potential. Unfinished dreams don't just vanish. They stay with you. They become tension in your chest, restlessness in your nights, a heaviness in your spirit that no amount of distraction can numb. You look in the mirror and see someone capable, but tired. Not tired from doing too much, tired from carrying what you never dared to do. And no, that fatigue doesn't come from the outside world. It comes from the inside war between your longing and your delay. The most honest question you can ask yourself, what would your life look like if you stopped saying, I'm working on it, and just did it? Not perfectly, not loudly, not all at once, but with a kind of quiet finality, a decision that says, this is who I am now. I'm done preparing. I'm stepping in. Most people wait for the moment to feel right. You don't need the moment. You need the decision. Why progress feels terrifying. Progress isn't scary because it's hard. It's scary because it exposes you. Once you begin, the truth arrives. You find out if your dream has legs. You face the fact that success takes more than vision. It takes repetition, resilience, refusal. That's why we love working on it. It lets us feel close to the goal without risking rejection. But what if rejection is part of your resurrection? What if falling on your face is the only way to rise on your feet? You owe yourself more than intention. Intentions are not action. Desire is not discipline. And ambition is not movement. The universe doesn't respond to what you hope to do. It moves in response to what you commit to, even when you're scared, unready, or uncertain. Because real transformation is not a lightning strike. It's the fire you light and refuse to let die. Your new vocabulary. Stop saying, I'm working on it. Start saying, I've started. I'm in. I've committed. Let your identity shift from someone who plans to someone who moves. You don't have to be fearless. You just have to stop lying to yourself about your delay. Because the most dangerous place to live is halfway between your desire and your decision, the ghost of almost. There's a version of you that never begins, and they follow you everywhere. They sit beside you in silence when you scroll through distraction. They whisper at midnight when you stare at the ceiling. They show you what could have been if only you had begun today. And the worst part isn't that you didn't start. It's that you knew. You knew what you wanted. You knew what mattered. But you let the day slip away like it was nothing. And now, that version of you, the one who almost tried, almost rose, almost lived, is haunting the mirror. The seduction of later. Later is the most seductive lie you'll ever believe. It's soft. It's convincing. It makes failure feel far away. You tell yourself you need just a little more time. Time to feel ready. Time to heal. Time to figure it all out. But what you're really doing is bargaining with your life, trading today's power for tomorrow's illusion. And every time you do, the mountain gets taller, the dream gets heavier, and the fire in you, it starts to dim. Time isn't waiting for you to heal. There's a painful truth no one says out loud. The world doesn't pause because you're tired. Time doesn't ask if you're okay. It just keeps moving. And if you don't move with it, you wake up one day and realize you're not stuck. You're just late. And the things you were once capable of doing, they're gone. Not because you couldn't, but because you wouldn't. The regret that hits deeper than failure. Failure stings. But regret is spiritual corrosion. Because you don't just remember what didn't work, you remember what you abandoned. You remember how close you were and how easily you let it go. One day, you'll sit with that version of yourself, the one who waited too long, and there will be no noise, no crowd, no second chances, just you and the silence of what never happened. The unromantic beginning. Here's the truth. Starting won't feel magical. You won't hear trumpets or feel lightning. It'll feel clumsy. It'll feel awkward. You might even question if it's worth it. But if you can push through those first fragile steps, even while doubting, even while stumbling, you'll find something waiting on the other side. Proof. Proof that you were always more ready than you believed. The future isn't promised, but it is shaped. You may not control what happens next, but you absolutely shape what becomes possible. Every act of courage, no matter how small, is a stone in the foundation of the life you claim to want. And today, this ordinary, overlooked, easy-to-ignore day is your chance to lay the next stone. Because one day, you look back, and you'll either be grateful you started now, or broken by the knowledge that you didn't. Today is still yours. So ask yourself, not tomorrow, but now. What would happen if today was the day you finally stopped waiting? What would happen if you gave this moment everything it's been asking for? You don't need a new plan. You need a new decision. Because this is the day your future self is watching. This is the day your regrets are hoping you'll avoid. This is the day that, years from now, you'll whisper, "Thank God I began."